Welcome to The Explainer. I'm your host, and today we're executing a rapid descent into the literal architecture of modern crisis. We're looking at some absolutely fascinating structural shifts playing out in source data from May 2026. Think about it. What actually happens when the massive, predictable systems we all rely on, like everything from global defense postures down to our basic seasonal climate calendars, what happens when they just suddenly collapse? Well, the answer isn't panic. It's actually a profound, highly technical pivot to sheer survival. So we're going to plunge from the absolute highest levels of national security threats straight down to the granular robotic adaptations that are literally keeping local mountain communities alive right now. Get ready, because this is a stark, totally objective look at our new reality. All right, let's dive right in. 4.2 seconds. According to the digital analytics in our source material, that is the average watch time for modern digital content. Seriously, just 4.2 seconds before human attention totally fractures and moves on. I want you to hold on to that number as we go through this explainer, because it perfectly mirrors the extreme velocity at which our massive national and local systems are being forced to pivot right now. Our window to react to unpredicted events is shrinking just as fast as our digital attention spans.
So this really illustrates the core thesis of today's analysis. We're facing massive national volatility. Systems built on predictable, long-term administrative calendars are basically buckling under the weight of geopolitical and environmental shocks. And the necessary response? It has to be immediate. We're talking extreme, highly localized survival strategies. The old calendars are just dead. We can't plan our responses by the fiscal quarter or the traditional 4 seasons anymore. Instead, communities are being forced to rebuild and adapt in real time.
Let's start at the macro level with the source data covering Memorial Day 2026. President Trump's May 25th national address at Arlington National Cemetery marked the approaching 250th anniversary of American independence. He addressed the profound human cost of military service, but what really grounds this in our theme of extreme systemic volatility is the geopolitical context here. He outlined immediate nuclear proliferation defense postures and directly referenced Operation Epic Fury against Iranian forces. So we are looking at a national security apparatus operating at the absolute highest levels of global tension.
Now, let's transition from that global defense posture over to a massive domestic physical response. 785. That's the exact number of emergency personnel that Governor Gavin Newsom had to instantly mobilize to coordinate the state's response to a totally unexpected crisis in California. And that massive mobilization? It was triggered by a severe hazardous materials emergency in Orange County following a chemical release on May 21st. This situation required a direct collaborative structural pivot between the state and the federal government. President Trump approved a federal emergency declaration, which authorized FEMA, under Federal Coordinating Officer Mark O'Hanlon, to provide emergency protective measures backed by 75% federal funding. So whether we're talking about international conflict or a sudden chemical release, this bureaucratic machinery is just constantly being forced into immediate, high-stakes reaction.
Which brings us to arguably the most vital question of this whole explainer. What happens when this massive, unpredictable, systemic volatility trickles down and actually hits a small, isolated local community? I mean, how does a town even survive when the larger structural calendars above it just simply stop functioning as expected? Take a look at the aesthetic of raw survival in this live broadcast originating from the Eagle Valley newsroom out in the Colorado Rockies. Notice how entirely stripped down it is. For the journalists and the local government in the Eagle Valley, traditional seasonal expectations are completely dead. They literally can no longer rely on historical weather models. Instead, live, unedited broadcasts and raw data telemetry have become their primary tools to navigate the total collapse of their expected calendar. They're basically managing their survival hour by hour.
And the environmental momentum driving this reliance on real-time data is just staggering. On March 31st, mountain telemetry confirmed the earliest snowpack recorded meltout in history. By late April, the entire regional basin hit a 0th percentile snowpack baseline. I mean, that is completely unprecedented depletion. Because of this, by May 15th, local agencies were forced to initiate a permanent year-round wildfire strategy. The whole concept of a safe season essentially evaporated overnight.
The financial whiplash of this environmental collapse is just as extreme. $12 million. In the span of a single administrative cycle, the Colorado Department of Transportation had to execute what sources describe as a functional reverse snow day, moving this massive sum of money at absolutely lightning speed.
This massive sum perfectly illustrates the intense administrative friction we're tracking here. CDOT took that $12 million, which by the way was originally budgeted for winter snowplow maintenance, and instantly reallocated it to fight catastrophic roadside wildfires. Why? Because the energy release component, that's the scientific metric of how hot ground fuels will actually burn, had already reached midsummer danger levels in March. The physical environment pulled the emergency brake, and the financial system was forcefully thrown against the windshield, having to fund fire mitigation literally months ahead of schedule.
Pragmatically managing that reality on the ground requires a pretty radical shift. In the Edwards Corps of the Eagle Valley, the local fire department had to execute a rapid three-step transition. Step 1. Formally acknowledge the extreme hydrological deficit, that 0th percentile reality we talked about. Step 2. Completely abandon traditional seasonal fire mitigation calendars altogether. And Step 3, which is a vital technological pivot, deploy autonomous robotic solutions to handle year-round suppression in these incredibly dangerous conditions.
And that technological solution, it's the RC mower. This is an autonomous, remote-controlled robotic machine deployed directly into the Edwards Corps. Its specific purpose is to clear highly combustible, dead vegetation from steep, rugged, high-country terrain that is completely inaccessible and, frankly, way too dangerous for manual human fire crews to ever reach. This isn't some science fiction concept. This is a frontline survival mechanism deployed right now to protect a community forced to adapt to an altered climate in real time.
Tying this all back together, the source analytics show a watched full video completion rate of just 18.01%. We started this explainer looking at a 4.2-second attention span, and this metric really confirms it. The digital world is directly reflecting the physical world. Whether we're trying to process a complex geopolitical shift on our screens or a blazing hillside in our actual backyards, our window to observe, process, and react to these shifting realities is relentlessly accelerating.
Which brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with today. Take a look at this quote from our source analysis. Are we moving into an era where we can no longer plan our lives by the season or the fiscal quarter, but must instead learn to thrive in a state of permanent real-time reaction? From Arlington to Orange County, right down to the robotic mowers in the Eagle Valley, the data strongly suggests that this state of permanent reaction is no longer just some anomaly. It is the new ultimate blueprint for survival. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep studying the data, and as always, stay curious.